Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So this is the second book of the Empire trilogies. As you can see, this particular cover says, the sequel to Daughter of the Empire from the other side of the Rift War. This is my favorite book in the trilogy, but it is also the book that convinced me to read the Riftwar Saga and then also led me to be disappointed by it. You see, you can see the red-headed man at the bottom standing next to the woman we know to be Lady Mara of the Acoma. You can also see that this is a very old, much-loved book that I purchased at a thrift store. And the thing about that red-headed man is he is Kevin of Zun, third son of the Baron, and what that means is that he is from the other side of the rift. Now, according to the social mores of the people of Tsuranuanni, when you capture a warrior from the opposing side of a battle, that if that warrior does not commit suicide, he is without honor and is made into a slave. This is in no small part because of their religious beliefs, which are reincarnation-based, and because their society is so devoted to this concept of honor, the idea is that if you become a slave after being a warrior, that means that you have lost all honor, and when you're reincarnated next, you will come back on a lower place in the wheel. Think of it as sort of a warrior's honor-based equivalent to, your karma kicking in after you are a bad person according to, say, Hindu or Buddhist traditions where you are a bad person, so the next time you come back in a worse station in life. And so the thing is that they take the Midekmians captive and make them into slaves, and this interaction between her and Kevin, the stage is set right from the very first of their personal interactions. I mean, she's already intrigued because the first time she sees Kevin and his cohorts, they've gone to the slave markets to purchase more slaves, something she doesn't see any problem with. She has no problem with slavery precisely because within the context of the Tsuranuanni belief system and their religious system and how they believe the world works, they're a very, very caste-based system with the belief that if you are born into that caste, that's where the gods wanted you to be. And so, logically, if a person was born into a slave caste, well, then the gods wanted him to be a slave, and that's just, how things are. And so, she sees them at the slave market, and they are exchanging, and what they're doing is they're playing a trick on the slave overseer, effectively to get a hold of extra clothing, which they are then feeding to a poor boy on the other side of the wall who gives them money. And both Lujan and Mara, they're very, very surprised by this. They're intrigued by this for two reasons. First of all, because it's showing a very interesting initiative and intelligence from the barbarians. And we all know that that's the traditional view, is that the barbarians are stupid. That's why one calls them barbarians. But also the perplexity because they're slaves. What are they going to spend money on? What can they possibly be thinking they're going to achieve by this? So when Mara has her first interaction with Kevin, which is based on the fact that she sets him up to be punished and then discovers that the punishment was entirely wrong because her overseer the overseer she had at that point in time made no sense, was doing stupid things. She calls Kevin in And she says, you're a slave. I can have you killed on a whim. What are you doing? And he's like, look, you can think of me as a slave, but I'm not. But then they have this interaction which sort of, its keynote informs the ongoing basis of the interactions between the two of them constantly. And that is when she says, asks him, why did you not commit ritual suicide? And he's confused because why would he? And her response is, of course, and at first she has a sort of a back and forth, in which she is at first under the impression that his former master, the people that he is indebted to, he has not pretended, he has been pretending not to be the son of a baron, to not be a noble, because the Midekmians know that the Tsuranuanni execute nobles and officers, so he's pretending to be an ordinary schlub. And she winds up saying, oh, so you didn't do it because you were ordered to not kill yourself. Okay. And he says, well, what? No, nobody would have to order me not to kill myself. And when she says, wait a minute, if you escaped and made it home, you would be welcomed back. And he would say, well, of course, I would in fact be lauded because I would have escaped from the enemy in order to be able to return home to contend with them again. And Mara is faced with this concept that would never have occurred to her before, and that she sort of has to work her mind around it, sort of this idea that, yes, there is an honor in the idea of you escaping from an enemy, returning to your previous home, and being able to take up arms against the enemy again. And precisely because her people believe that the moment you have been taken captive, you have no more honor, it's this very, very difficult mental hurdle for her. And throughout this book, there's an ongoing back and forth between her and Kevin as they both have to come to understand the other's culture and how it works. Because by comparison with Midekmian culture, the Tsuranuanni are indirect and very, very political, but they're very political in a way where, they have this big meeting of all of the clan Hadama, which is the clan that Mara's Acoma are part of, and Kevin sits there baffled, watching as everybody just sort of walks back and forth and has conversations about, who's trading with who, and polite interchanges, asking after the health of family members. And at the end of it, Mara says, well, that was a good day's work, and now we know all this political stuff. And that's because they don't have the discussion directly. Their discussion is all in terms of who approached who, because the person who approaches somebody is seen as lower caste, lower class, who is seen as subservient, because if you are the one who is going to somebody, that means you are the person who is asking, whereas the one who just sits there and waits for others to come to them is higher up. And he has to sort of work through this very, very twisty concept where the negotiations are not happening directly, they are happening indirectly. Likewise, Mara finds his approach very, very twisty, in part because she is so fundamentally used to thinking on several different levels that, for example, when he suggests she sends a letter of condolence, and she asks him what that is, and he says, well, it's a letter where you tell somebody, I'm sorry your father died, and I hope, you're dealing with it okay. And to her, it seems like a political move, whereas to him, that's just, that's acting polite in polite society. And also, if you genuinely cared about a person, and she and her father-in-law, Takuma, have a difficult relationship because she arranged for the death of because she married his son and then arranged for his son's death as part of her strategy to keep her family from being murdered, in the last book. But Everything for her is political because everything for the Tsuranuanni is political. Every single move you make has secondary meanings, and so she finds Kevin's thought patterns twisty because the motivations he suggests, which are kindness and so on, are just, they're not even issues that you bother with. And so this whole book is a lot of political discussion, a lot of going through things, with Kevin acting as a reader proxy to ask questions. But also it allows a lot of sort of digging into ideas about, ethics versus morals, and how you define things like honor, and sort of that concept of that's very much a if you are honorable, then does that just mean nobody caught you at it? Anyway, the reason that this book, and she falls in love with Kevin, and there's a whole bunch of dramatic stuff, and she winds up bearing him a child who doesn't show up until the next book, which we will talk about in the next book. And he also never finds out that she's pregnant, because at the end of this book, the Emperor of Tsuranuanni says, okay, everybody's sending their Midekmian slaves back to Midekmia, which is kind of a horrifying scene, because Mara didn't really explain herself to Kevin. She just kind of packed him off to where everybody was supposed to be taken away to be sent back to Midekmia. And because he's fallen in love with her and she's in love with him, he's kind of gutted that the woman he's in love with is sending him away like this. Anyway, so there's this. But the thing about this book is that in the course of this book, Hokanu, who is a member of the Shinzawai family, who is very, very Tsuranuanni, but also kind and intelligent, and a wonderful, wonderful match for Mara in ways that are different than Kevin's, because Kevin gets her on certain empathetic levels that I'm not sure Hokanu would necessarily have done, because she fell in love with Kevin. She really did. But Hokanu is of the same culture as her, so they have that cultural base to sort of, have a meeting of the minds. And at the end of the book, she proposes marriage to him, and they are married at the start of the next book. His older brother, who, if I recall correctly, his name is Kasumi. Not that I remember these things very clearly, and I forgot to... Yes, Kasumi. He wound up in Midekmia, and being trapped there, and, went and became part of their culture, and got ennobled by the king, and a whole bunch of other things. And I was genuinely disappointed when I read the Riftwar Saga, because I had been really, really interested in maybe reading Kasumi's side of things, to read his internal, thoughts and struggles with these concepts, the issues of dealing with an alien world where things just didn't work the same as he was used to. And maybe I missed it, but I just remember being vastly disappointed that I didn't get that, because this is such an alien culture. There is a discussion that Mara and Kevin have about the fact that the concept of borrowing doesn't exist in Tsuranuanni. This idea of, I have a friend who wants to read a book that I own, so that friend says, hey, can I borrow it? And you hand them the book, and they go away with it for a couple of weeks, and when they finish reading it, they hand it back, and they don't get to keep the book, and I don't get anything about it, save the warm and fuzzy feeling that I have given my friend the opportunity to read a book they were interested in. And it's such an interesting idea that they don't even have this concept, and I never even got around to talking about my favorite scene in this book, which is about bribery. Anyways, so that's this book, and and I will come back next week with the next book, assuming I actually finish it, because it's my least favorite book in the series. See you all next week. Goodbye.